My stepmother handed me a garbage bag at my birthday party and said, "This is all you deserve." But when I opened it later that night, I found a document that made me richer than my entire family combined. What happened next will shock you. I'm Charlotte, and this is the story of how a bag of literal trash became my golden ticket to revenge. Picture this: the Ashford family mansion, crystal chandeliers casting rainbow patterns across marble floors, designer gowns worth more than most people's cars, and the scent of imported roses filling the air. It was my 25th birthday, but you wouldn't know it from the way I was being treated. Mini cliffhanger: little did I know, this night would change everything. My stepmother Victoria glided across the room in her $15,000 Valentino dress, her perfectly manicured nails wrapped around a champagne flute that cost more than my monthly salary. Behind her, my half-sister Madison twirled in her new Hermes scarf, the one Daddy had bought her just because it was Tuesday. "Charlotte, darling," Victoria's voice dripped with fake sweetness, "we have something special for you." The entire room fell silent. 30 guests in designer clothes, holding crystal glasses, all turning to watch what would happen next. My father stood by the fireplace, his Rolex catching the light, but his eyes? They were cold as ice. Victoria disappeared into the hallway and returned with a black garbage bag. "This," she announced with a smile that could cut glass, "is your birthday gift." The room erupted in whispers. Madison covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. My father sipped his $500 bottle of wine like nothing was happening. And me? I stood there in my 3-year-old dress from Target, feeling every pair of eyes burning into my soul. But here's what they didn't know: I'd learned to expect nothing from this family. Mini cliffhanger, because what was coming next would make their cruelty look like child's play. You see, I wasn't really an Ashford. My mother had married into this family when I was 16, bringing me into a world of private jets and charity galas where I'd never belong. When she died in that car accident 2 years later, I became the unwanted reminder of my father's mistake marriage. "Open it," Victoria commanded, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. Every face in that room watched as I untied the bag. Inside? Actual garbage. Crumpled newspapers, empty food containers, and what looked like cleaning supplies. The humiliation hit me like a physical blow. "How thoughtful," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the sound of muffled laughter. Madison couldn't contain herself anymore. "Well, it matches your wardrobe." More laughter. These people, wearing clothes that cost more than I'd make in 6 months, were laughing at me like I was some kind of entertainment. But then my father spoke, and his words cut deeper than any knife. "Charlotte, you've been living here rent-free for 7 years. Consider this motivation to find your own place." Mini cliffhanger: if only he knew what he'd just set in motion. The party continued around me like I'd become invisible. Servers in crisp white uniforms passed around canapes that cost $50 per bite. The string quartet played softly in the corner, their music mixing with the sound of polite conversation and crystal clinking. I escaped to my room, the smallest bedroom in the mansion, tucked away in what used to be the servants' quarters. As I sat on my simple IKEA bed, surrounded by hand-me-down furniture, I dumped out that bag of trash one more time. That's when I saw it. Hidden between layers of newspaper was an envelope. Old, yellowed, and sealed with red wax. My hands trembled as I opened it, and what I found inside made my heart stop. It was a will. My grandfather's will. Mini cliffhanger, and according to this document, I owned something that would destroy them all. The paper was dated 3 months before my mother's death. My grandfather, my mother's father, had been a quiet man who'd made his fortune in tech stocks back in the early days of Silicon Valley. Everyone thought he'd died broke, living in that tiny apartment downtown. They were wrong. dead wrong. According to this will, my grandfather had left me his entire estate, $47 million in various investments, plus a controlling share in Ashford Industries, the very company that had made my father rich. My hand shook as I read the legal document. Apparently, my grandfather had bought shares in my father's company years ago, back when Dad was struggling to get started. Over time, those shares had grown, split, and multiplied. The math was staggering. I didn't just have money. I had power. Mini cliffhanger, but the real shock came when I read the final clause. The will stated that if anything happened to my mother before my 25th birthday, the inheritance would be held in a trust until today, my 25th birthday. And here's the kicker, the document had been hidden in my mother's personal belongings, which Victoria had thrown away years ago. Except she hadn't thrown it all away. She'd kept some items, including what she thought was just old paperwork, and tonight she'd literally handed it back to me wrapped in garbage. The irony was delicious. I spent the next 3 hours researching everything. The law firm mentioned in the will still existed. The investments were real. The shares in Ashford Industries? They made me the majority shareholder. Which meant I could fire my father from his own company. Mini cliffhanger, but first, I had a party to rejoin. I walked back downstairs, still carrying that garbage bag, but now I carried it like a designer purse. The party was winding down, but the core family was still there, Victoria, Madison, and dear old Dad, sitting in the leather chairs by the fireplace, probably planning how quickly they could get rid of me. Victoria, I called out, my voice steady and clear. She looked up from her conversation, annoyed. What now, Charlotte? I wanted to thank you for the gift. I held up the garbage bag. It was exactly what I needed. Madison snorted. Finally accepting your place in this family? Actually, I pulled out my phone, I just made a few calls. Turns out, I needed to speak with the board of Ashford Industries. You know, as the new majority shareholder. The silence that followed was beautiful. Mini cliffhanger, you should have seen their faces. My father's wine glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. Victoria's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the color draining from her face. And Madison? She looked like someone had just told her the Hermes store was closing forever. That's impossible, my father whispered. I pulled out the will, holding it like a trophy. My grandfather, Thomas Chen, left me his entire estate. Including his 67% stake in your company, Richard. The math hit them all at once. My father owned 30% of Ashford Industries. Victoria had 3% from their prenup. I now owned 67%. Which meant I owned them. You see, I continued, walking around their expensive furniture like I owned the place, which, technically, I now did. Grandfather bought in when you were desperate for investors. He got preferred shares, voting rights, the whole package. Mini cliffhanger, but I wasn't done destroying them yet. Charlotte, let's be reasonable, my father started, his voice shaking. We're family, family? I laughed, and it echoed through those vaulted ceilings. Family doesn't give trash as birthday gifts. Family doesn't humiliate each other in front of guests. And family certainly doesn't throw their dead daughter-in-law's belongings in the garbage. Victoria found her voice, though it cracked like thin ice. What do you want? What do I want? I pretended to think about it. Well, let's start with an apology. From all of you. For 7 years of making me feel worthless. They exchanged glances. Pride versus survival. Madison spoke first, her voice small. I'm sorry, Charlotte. Victoria nodded quickly. We're all sorry. We didn't mean, oh, but you did mean it, I interrupted. Every cruel word, every dismissive look, every time you made me eat dinner alone while you three enjoyed your fancy meals. You meant all of it. Mini cliffhanger, because now it was time for the real punishment. Here's what's going to happen, I announced, pulling up the company's contact information on my phone. Tomorrow morning, I'm calling an emergency board meeting. As majority shareholder, I have some changes to make. My father's face had gone from pale to gray. Charlotte, the company is my life's work, and my grandfather's money built it, I shot back. Funny how that works. I looked around the room, at the crystal chandelier that cost more than most people's houses, at the imported Italian marble, at the family portrait where they'd positioned me in the back corner like an afterthought. Richard, I said, using his first name for the first time in years, you're fired. Effective immediately. The sound of his sharp intake of breath was music to my ears. Mini cliffhanger, but I was just getting started. Victoria, your consulting contract with the company? Terminated. Madison, that internship Daddy got you in the marketing department? Sorry, we're restructuring. Madison burst into tears. You can't do this. This is our life. No, I corrected her, this was your life. Built on my family's money, maintained by humiliating me, and now ending because you couldn't resist one final insult. Victoria stood up, her designer dress rustling like autumn leaves. You ungrateful little, careful, I warned. I could also call the SEC about those expense reports you've been filing. You know, the ones where you claim personal shopping trips as business expenses? She shut her mouth so fast I heard her teeth click. My father tried one last desperate plea. Charlotte, I raised you, no, you housed me. Barely. In a room the size of your walk-in closet, eating leftovers while you three dined on imported delicacies. Mini cliffhanger, and then I revealed the final twist that would haunt them forever. But here's the beautiful part, I continued, savoring every word. Grandfather's will includes a clause about family unity. If I can prove that his daughter, my mother, was mistreated after her death, then I also inherit his personal collection. Victoria's eyes widened. What collection? I smiled, and for the first time in years, it was genuine. His art collection. The one he never told anyone about. Monet, Picasso, Van Gogh, apparently, he was quite the collector. Conservative estimate? Another $30 million. The room spun around them like a kaleidoscope of shattered dreams. And Victoria, I added sweetly, giving your stepdaughter garbage as a birthday gift while humiliating her in front of witnesses? That's definitely grounds for proving mistreatment. She collapsed back into her chair, understanding the full scope of what had just happened. Mini cliffhanger, because the real revenge was just beginning. So here's the deal, I announced, walking toward the massive windows that overlooked their perfectly manicured garden. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. I'll be moving into the master suite next week. This is our home. Madison wailed. Actually, check the deed. The house was bought with company money, money that came from my grandfather's investment. So technically, I own this too. I pulled out my phone again. I'm texting my lawyer right now. By morning, you'll all receive official notice of the changes. The three of them sat there like statues, their perfect lives crumbling around them like the cookie-cutter facade they'd always been. But then came the moment that made everything worth it. Mini cliffhanger, the moment they realized their biggest mistake. Oh, and one more thing, I said, pausing at the doorway. That charity gala you're hosting next month? The one where you plan to announce Madison's engagement to the governor's son? I'll be there too. Victoria looked up, mascara starting to run despite the waterproof formula. Charlotte, please, as the new CEO of Ashford Industries, I continued, I'll be giving a speech about our company's new direction, including our commitment to treating all family members with respect and dignity. The implication hit them like a freight train. Everyone they knew, everyone in their social circle, would witness their public humiliation. You wouldn't, my father whispered. Try me. Mini cliffhanger, but the final twist was still coming. 3 weeks later, I stood in the master bedroom of the Ashford mansion, watching as movers loaded the last of Victoria's designer furniture into a truck. The room looked different now, brighter, somehow, without all their dark energy filling it. Madison had moved in with friends, taking only what she could carry. Victoria had found a small condo across town. And my father? He'd moved into a studio apartment downtown, right next to the building where my grandfather had lived his final years. The irony wasn't lost on me. But here's the twist that even I didn't see coming. As I was going through my grandfather's personal effects, boxes and boxes of documents that Victoria had nearly thrown away, I found another envelope. This one addressed to Victoria. Inside was a letter, dated just after my mother's funeral. Mrs. Ashford, it read, your treatment of my granddaughter has not gone unnoticed. Every cruel word, every humiliation, every moment you made her feel unwanted, I've documented it all. This will has been updated accordingly. Charlotte will inherit everything, but only when she's strong enough to handle it. The garbage bag was your idea, wasn't it? How fitting that it should be your downfall. Mini cliffhanger, he'd planned this revenge from beyond the grave. My grandfather hadn't just left me money. He'd orchestrated the perfect revenge, counting on Victoria's cruelty to deliver the very document that would destroy her. The garbage bag wasn't just an insult, it was the delivery system for justice. I sat in his old leather chair, in my new office at Ashford Industries, looking out at the city skyline. On my desk was a framed photo of my mother, and next to it, that original will, now legally recognized and executed. The company was thriving under new management. I'd kept most of the employees but installed a strict anti-bullying policy and raised the minimum wage for all support staff. Funny how well a company can do when it's run by someone who actually understands what it's like to be treated poorly. Victoria called last week, asking for a loan to help with Madison's wedding expenses. I listened to her entire sob story about how they'd lost everything, how Madison's fiancé's family was reconsidering the engagement, how they just needed a little help. I'll think about it, I told her. Mini cliffhanger, but I'd already made my decision. The charity gala was everything I'd hoped for. I wore my mother's pearls, the ones Victoria had claimed were costume jewelry and thrown in that garbage bag, and a custom Chanel dress that cost more than Victoria's monthly rent. When I took the stage to give my speech, I saw them in the back of the ballroom. Victoria in a dress I recognized from 3 seasons ago, Madison without her usual designer accessories, and my father, well, he hadn't even been invited. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice carrying across the room filled with Hartford's elite, tonight I want to talk about the true meaning of family. The room fell silent, crystal glasses paused halfway to lips, conversations died mid-sentence. Family isn't about blood or marriage certificates. It's about respect, kindness, and lifting each other up. Some people learn this lesson through love. I paused, making eye contact with Victoria across the room, and others learn it through consequences. The applause was thunderous. After the gala, as I walked to my new Tesla, the exact same model they'd bought Madison, but in a color she'd wanted and couldn't afford, I found Victoria waiting by my car. Charlotte, she said, her voice broken, I know what we did was wrong. But Madison, she's getting married next month, and we can't afford the wedding dress? I finished for her. The venue deposit? The catering? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I opened my car door, then turned back to her one final time. Victoria, 7 years ago, you told me I didn't deserve a place in this family. Tonight, I'm telling you the same thing. The difference is, I have the power to make it stick. The final twist: as I drove away, I could see her in my rearview mirror, still standing there, finally understanding what it felt like to be powerless. But here's what she didn't know, what none of them knew. Earlier that day, I'd anonymously paid for Madison's entire wedding. Not because I forgave them, but because my mother would have wanted me to be the bigger person. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's becoming everything they said you'd never be, while still having the grace they never showed you. I am Charlotte Chen Ashford, CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, owner of a mansion that once felt like a prison, and granddaughter of a man who taught me that patience and planning can be more powerful than any immediate reaction. And every night, when I sleep in that master bedroom, I remember that sometimes the worst thing someone can give you turns out to be exactly what you need. That garbage bag didn't just contain trash. It contained my future. Ending twist: the grandfather had orchestrated the entire revenge from beyond the grave, counting on Victoria's cruelty to deliver the will that would destroy her. The garbage bag insult was actually his planned delivery system for justice, and Charlotte anonymously paid for Madison's wedding despite everything, showing she became the person her family never was.